This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason, to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Raj Schaefer.
Welcome to the How to Run for Office podcast for My Campaign Coach. Many thanks to Campaign Sidekick for making this podcast possible. You know, I love a good campaign ground game, and Sidekick is the best tool out there for the job. Voter databasing, canvassing app, and phone bank all in one for unbeatable prices. Check it out at campaignsidekick.vote. Our guest this week is on a mission, and he doesn't ever take a mission lightly. Lieutenant Commander retired Dan Crenshaw is running for Congress in Texas' 2nd Congressional District, left by retiring Congressman Ted Poe. Dan grew up in the district, a native of Katy, Texas, and lived across the globe as his father's career led their family. From an early age, Dan Crenshaw knew he wanted to be a warrior. Specifically, he wanted to be a Navy SEAL. In 2006, that mission met with success, and another took its place: do battle with our nation's enemies. Through multiple deployments, Dan did just that. As a SEAL officer, Dan honed his leadership in warcraft constantly. Serving our nation's interest and bringing home his brothers were his mission goals. On Dan's third deployment in June of 2012, he was struck by an IED, losing one eye entirely, and the other was judged to be a lost cause. In a miracle that he attributes to God's grace and his bride's love, he was eventually able to recover sight in that eye. Even with his injuries, Dan didn't quit. He deployed twice more with his SEAL brothers overseas and was medically retired in 2016. After retiring from the SEALs, Dan earned a master's degree from Harvard and returned to Texas. Following Ted Poe's retirement announcement in November, Dan and his bride made the decision to run for Congress and set out on an improbable race. They had no name ID, no candidate experience, no campaign team, and $0 in the campaign account. And they only had 2 months until the first ballots went out in the mail. Outspent well over 30-1, Dan and his team built an insurgent campaign that eked out a spot in the runoff race by less than 200 votes. Now he's in the runoff and campaigning hard for the top spot. All my previous interviews have been recorded online, but I had the pleasure of doing this one in person and had a blast meeting Dan and talking with him. I'm excited about his prospects in the race and the leadership ability that he's bringing to the table. Now let's get to the interview. Dan, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you've got a really unique story, and it's brought you to where you are today. Run for Congress here in Katy in Houston, Texas. Got a pretty weird-shaped district, kind of the epitome of gerrymandering, but getting to run here, with a lot of Harris County in your district. And I'd like to start out, we're going to kind of get through your whole story today and the time we've got, but I want to start out kind of talking about your background. I believe you grew up here in the area and a local boy, and you got a pretty awesome story to talk about. Growing up here, going into the military, and then you talk about what brought you back here to run for Congress.
Well, I grew up in Katy, Texas, just west of Houston. It's the energy corridor. And my dad worked in the energy industry our whole lives. So not only did I grow up in the Houston area, but I grew up all over the world. Lived in South America for a while, learned to speak Spanish, learned what it was like to live in different cultures, be the new kid over and over again. And be the only American that really was in my high school class, and it was quite the experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything at this point, but it really makes you appreciate what you have here in the U.S. I lost my mom when I was young to breast cancer, and that was tough. That was maybe my first big test in life, but shortly after that, I was about 10 years old. Read a book about the Navy SEALs. And that was it for me. I planned every bit of my life from that moment on becoming a SEAL, whether it was going to ROTC or the Naval Academy, or whatever it was. But everything was directed towards that. I started training. You can never train enough. Found that out when I got to BUD/S. And in 2006, that's when I was commissioned as an officer and started my career.
So if anybody that hasn't listened to it needs to go over to the Jocko podcast, listen to, I think it was like episode 118 or something like that you were on. I had a great long interview. I'm a big fan of the Jocko podcast. He's one of your Navy SEAL brothers. And you get to go into a lot more detail than we're going to get a chance to today into your story. But the short story is that Dick Marcinko and Charlie Sheen got you to be a Navy SEAL, from what I recall.
Yeah.
And so you had a unique path. You seemed like you were pretty driven from a young age. You felt like you had a mission pretty early on.
Yeah.
And I think that's, from what I know about you, that's been a consistent factor. You finding that next mission, regardless of where you were as a teenager, wanting to become a SEAL, becoming a SEAL, wanting to get out there and get things done in combat, which you did. Let's talk about that a little bit. You had a number of different deployments during your career, right?
Yep. So like I said, I went through BUDS in 2006. When I finally finished training, that's after BUDS, it's after SEAL qualification training. It ended up being about 2 years for me. And I joined SEAL Team 3 and met them on deployment in Iraq in 2008. Went back on deployment in 2010, same with SEAL Team 3. And this was again to Ramadi this time. And great deployment for me. I mean, I was in charge of over 50 personnel out there, and as a guy in your mid-20s, immense amounts of responsibility, planning for and managing all sorts of different $1 million assets on high-level missions. Really taught me a lot. Taught me what it meant to be a leader, what it means to take care of your people, and felt like that I was making an impact for the American people. And that's always what's driven me. That's always been, I think, the underlying mission is: do you have purpose in this life? Are you contributing in some way? And that's how I think America runs. It's on this sense of individual power to find your purpose and to find your meaning in life, and that's extremely important for not just me but anybody. And I got on my third deployment, and this with SEAL Team 3. We were in Afghanistan working out of the Kandahar province, and about 6 months into that deployment, I was hit by an IED blast that destroyed my right eye completely, blinded me in my left, and I was able to walk away from it, but I was put into a coma pretty quickly after that because I was in very bad shape, and woke up 6 days later totally blind, and blind for a long time. It was a miracle that a few surgeries later, I was able to see again, and slowly but surely get different kind of contacts and glasses that I could work with to see and live a fairly normal life. Could still jump out of airplanes, go diving, shooting, things like that, and that was exactly what I intended to do. And couldn't quite get the Navy to let me do that, but they did let me to redeploy again in a different role, more working on the intelligence side of things that we do in special operations. So still fulfilling my purpose, I think, still making an impact. Went back to the Middle East, worked in the Persian Gulf, worked in Lebanon. Then my last deployment was in Korea, doing a lot of the same. And at that point, I had to be medically retired. We couldn't get any more waivers to deploy. The big bureaucracy catches up with you eventually, and now I'm running for office, and I hate big bureaucracy. So I'll give you an idea of my politics. And again, running for office is really about finding a way to make an impact again. It's about finding your purpose again. So that's just what gets me up in the morning. I left the Navy and went to the Harvard Kennedy School of Government to get a master's in public administration, because that's what drives me. It wasn't business school or law school, even though the money's a lot better. The job potential is a lot better. I was looking for policy work. I really just wanted that low pay and long hours type of job. And now I have a job that's no pay and long hours. That's even hours. I really hit the gold mine here.
Everything you always dreamed of.
Yeah, how much can we work without getting paid for it at all?
Yeah.
But it's worth it. It's for the right. That's what a cause is. That's what it is to find your purpose. So my wife and I, we talked about it, we prayed about it, and this is what we did.
Well, I think that as I see as typical in a lot of cases of people that I've been around, God and a good bride will carry you through a lot.
Yeah, that's
Sound
true.
like she is. That's been a big part of y'all's relationships, is knowing that this kind of thing was coming, or her being a real mission partner in those things. What was it like as you guys started talking about running for office? I'm always a big fan of a spouse. You got to be 100% on board. She seems like she's a huge part of that you guys are doing this together. Talk a little about y'all's relationship and how that evolved around politics and the decision y'all made to run for office.
Well, yeah, I think she maybe knew that was the right choice long before I ever really did. I was always a little more unsure about whether we'd ever look at elected office. And then when I was at Harvard, I think I became a little more comfortable with the idea. So it was not when we really decided, which is in late November after Ted Poe announced retirement. It's not as if we'd never thought about running for office before. It's just that we never thought it would be so soon. We didn't have any opportunity to do it. I mean, you don't really just go decide to run. You need to find a window of opportunity, and you need to have some backing. You need to have some kind of connections, political connections, and especially funding and money. So we had none of those things, but we did have a window of opportunity. When Ted Poe announced retirement, it's my district. My parents have lived in the Spring. I grew up in Katy, but my parents have been living in the Spring for the last 13 years. That's where I've been coming back to all these years. And so it was the right choice. I came home one day after learning that Ted Poe announced retirement, and just having been in the room with some folks who knew the right people and who could at least get us started. So we didn't have political connections, so to speak, but we had one, which means somebody to hire and willing to work with us. And she decided pretty quick. She was excited about it right away. I was a little more cautious, and we thought about it for a few more days, asked around, and just some trusted friends and family, and that really thought about whether it'd be a good idea. And then the real question was, what do we have to lose?
Yeah.
And the answer was nothing. I mean, I would have to turn down a job. That's what I would lose. I would lost the opportunity to go work for the Department of Defense on counter weapons and mass destruction policy, and I think it was worth it. You can always find a job like that again. And reality is, if I care about nuclear proliferation issues, then you can affect a lot more change. You can be a lot more effective in Congress than you can working behind the scenes on a very narrowly focused job. So that's what's great about elected office. You can affect everything. It's really about how much effort you're willing to put into it. It's always going to be hard. Nobody has any illusions about how impossible government is to deal with. But I think hard work in this kind of job probably pays off. And not everything you do needs to be based on legislation. A lot of things, you can probably have a lot of job satisfaction, I think, from just finding things that are not necessarily partisan, finding projects that are not necessarily driven by legislation, just driven by leadership. And I think that's a really cool place to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of power that you have as a congressman, ability to do things by just picking up the phone and asking the right question at the right time, whether it's in a hearing or it's just calling over to the Pentagon and saying, hey, let me talk to this guy.
Yeah.
Answer this question for me.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's local things too. My mother, before she passed, was a nutritionist at Katy ISD, and want to do something in her name. And it doesn't have to be some big expensive program, but it can be, Congressman ex-Navy SEAL is coming to run a mile with the kids today.
Right.
You got it, because childhood obesity is a problem, especially in the South. And what are we really doing about it? We could talk about expensive studies and programs, or you could just stick to the basics and get kids out and moving, but show them a path. Well, this is what happens when you focus on health and nutrition. This is the base that you operate from. This is your base of success. And this is what you can accomplish when you actually focus on that. And I can be a good testament to that and bring some credibility to the conversation. Just things like that. It's just leadership. It's just being involved in the community. And when you're in a position like elected office, you get the opportunity to actually affect change, as opposed to just when you're not. So,
well, I think that's an opportunity that I definitely hope you maintain the passion for, because I think that's one of the areas we have a deficit in D.C. in a lot of areas, because there's so much more opportunity you have for true leadership when you're in that office, when you have that election certificate, to be able to step up there outside of legislation, outside of a government role, to be able to use your office to make a positive impact that doesn't cost the taxpayers a dime.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost the taxpayers anything or require a funding bill or appropriation in order to be able to go help and motivate some kids to go run a mile. It doesn't take any of that to go and have a personal impact like you have raising money for flood recovery here after the hurricane. These are all things that you get to do and can leverage your name ID and platform to make a difference in people's lives that doesn't grow the role of government one single bit. And I think that's something very admirable that I've seen throughout your campaign as I've been paying attention to it. I think that's part of why you've had the level of success you have as far as so many people coming on board and getting excited about your race. Is because that's frankly weird compared to a lot of the status quo when we see other people running for office.
Yeah. Well, I think going into this, we knew that the way to win was connecting with people and then connecting with them in a way that makes them motivated enough to connect with others. And it's a contagion, but it's a good one. That's how you win. There's not a lot of secrets to politics. People get really wrapped up in the numbers and the polling and this and that. That stuff's helpful, but if you don't have a guiding force, like a guiding why, like you need to know why you're doing this. If you don't know why you're running, if you just want to be a politician, and that's essentially how I see my opponent. He just wants to be a politician. He just really wants to be on the inside. He thinks that's really cool.
Wants the title, wants the lapel pin.
You can't articulate why you want to be there, and people. I mean, you can state some reasons, you can state some policies, but if people don't sense that it's genuine and that there's a true calling for you, they're not going to be excited about it, and you can't fake that. Nobody can fake that.
Right.
So you either have it or you don't.
So what's the big why for you?
It's impact. It's and there's issues, and then there's longer term issues. So issues are going to be border security and flooding. Those are existential threats to Texans here. So that's a little bit more the policy side. On a deeper level, it's a future for the Republican Party. I really feel that we're not messaging correctly, that we don't know why we believe what we believe, and if maybe we do on a very intrinsic, subjective level, but we can't articulate it, and our politicians certainly don't articulate it enough. It's extremely important to me to bring in more Latino voters, to bring in more young people to the Republican Party, and help them understand what it is about our message that might be compelling, like why our governing philosophy is the right philosophy, because it encompasses a coherent market theory along with a coherent moral framework. And I don't think the left does that.
No.
Maybe they used to. They used to be sort of a labor party, but they're far from that now. I have no idea what they stand for now.
Neither do they.
Except little pockets of activism, right? That all become sort of a coalition. That's not a governing party.
No.
So and that's a very irresponsible way to govern if that is your governing party. So, but for some reason it's compelling to young people. So the why is really about giving people leaders they can be proud of, giving them a voice that they can be proud of, even if they disagree with some of the policy issues. So policy issues are important, and I stand where I stand on those, but I think more than that, it's giving somebody a leader they can be proud of. Like, I want people to be proud of their government again, and I want young people to raise their hands when asked if they're proud to be Americans. That used to be a no-brainer, but that's not exactly what you see in colleges these days, and there's lots of proof of that. But so those are a lot of, I guess, whys, why we want to do this, and that's what I talk to voters about, and it seems to resonate.
So when you first started running this race, you had a very short time window, right? Poe announced he was retiring in November, so you got the primary in early March. There's going to be a bunch of people in the race. This will be kind of the Wild West when it comes to politics, and now you're trying to build a campaign team. You're starting from relative one connection. You said you got to raise money, you got to build a volunteer base, you got to go from pretty low to no name ID all of a sudden to having a campaign that can at least take second in the runoff.
Yeah.
What does it look like? How did you connect with Brendan Steinhauser? How did the campaign kind of come together?
Yeah. Well, Brendan that was my first, I guess, quote unquote political connection. Was connected with him through a friend who worked on Capitol Hill with Tom Cotton's campaign. That's also how we got connected with Tom Cotton. And, how did we start? I mean, you start with the basics. You build a website. You send in all your pictures so that we can just put ourselves out there a little bit. We write a bio. You write out some policies, and I just finished a master's degree in this stuff. I know my policy issues pretty well, so I write it all, and I think that people appreciate that too. I go into way more detail than my opponent. I'll speculate all sorts of reasons why he doesn't, but the reality is I have a lot of experience at the federal level, and he has none, which is. Conversely, he likes to talk about all his experience passing bills. But, so you start there, and you try to build out your team. If you can afford it, it's really mostly about fundraising from friends and family, because none of the big donors want to get involved because it's a 9-way race, and they don't know who you are, and it's just not worth it to them. We knew we had an advantage because my story and who I am, and my very obvious war wounds, kind of they get my foot in the door. People are. It doesn't just go in one ear and out the other. People are at least pay attention for a split second. It doesn't get you elected though. You need to do everything I said before. You need to connect with them. You need to tell them the why. You need to inspire them, and put your foot's in the door. So we have some advantage, but it's not enough. Especially not in this district. Voters are pretty involved, especially primary voters, and they want to know what you're all about. They're very skeptical. They like to ask questions, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have informed voters out there who come to all of our forums, and they want to hear how you articulate your values and your policies along with the guy or gal next to you, and they make decisions based on that. So you got to know what you're talking about, and you got to know why you're there, and that's what we did over and over and over again. If we had time off, we would just try to find crowded places and just go there and hand out flyers. Just get your name ID up, get your signs out there, just the basics. Raise enough money to do some mail, and it was a struggle. It was a serious struggle because there was just no time.
Yeah.
And nobody ever runs for Congress in this amount of time with no name ID. It just doesn't happen.
No.
Everybody's like, you should start about a year out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the normal path. And we completely threw that out the window. Our somewhat of an advantage is that nobody started until late November because nobody was going to oppose Ted Poe.
Right.
He only announced just before Thanksgiving. So nobody really had name ID except for my current opponent, Kevin Roberts, because he was a state rep, but his name ID is pretty limited. And on election day, we beat him by 8%. So overall, when you kind of mail in ballots and early voting, he came out on top. Again, because our momentum, it's hard to create momentum fast enough. You've got to, that takes a lot of effort and time and luck.
And you guys, with the November announcement, you get your campaign going, you're immediately hit by the holiday season when nobody wants to care about politics. And then, so you pretty much have about 2 months to actually get things done. So you're pretty much left a 2-month campaign.
And even that's not really true because early ballots go out 30 days before March 6th, so you really have a month.
So
we lost big on mail-in ballots.
You just have such a limited time frame to you can do a little bit of fundraising for the holidays, but everybody's paying for Christmas presents.
Yep.
And then you come in and you're sitting there in January with 30 days for mail-in ballots. You got about just shy of, we got probably like 45 or 50 before early voting starts, and about 65 until Election Day. It seems like what you guys did was you focused very heavy on ground game and earned media, because you were in a situation where by that point you knew that with one of your opponents was putting in a couple $100,000, and the other opponent was put in several $1 million, ended up over $6 million, I think, that they self-funded.
Yep.
Being outspent by those kind of margins, knowing, I think you guys ended up with a little over 200, right, in the primary? How much was it?
Yeah, that's correct.
So y'all raised $200 in the primary. You had one of your opponents took first place, hit somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5, and then like $6 million was the one that you just narrowly eked out by like 100 some votes.
Kathleen, yep.
So I mean, a very, very tight margin, a large district, and you guys built that largely off of earned media, right?
Mm-hmm. Earned media helped us a lot. Of course, we did a little bit of everything. We got on radio. We got our mailers out, not nearly to the same extent that everybody else did. We did have a decent ground game with great volunteers. We have signs, a little unusual. Because it has my picture on it with my name. And that's a very important, because I wear an eye patch, so people notice that, right? So that helps us a lot. People, again, they think twice about it as opposed to just ignoring it like they do every other political sign. Signs are usually not very effective unless you can get a ton of them out and build name ID with them, and we had a ton of them out. And that... So people get curious, right? And it creates a little bit of buzz because they want to know a little bit more about me because it's like an odd picture.
Yeah.
So
like, why is a pirate running for Congress?
Right. They want to know that. So they might look it up and then they like what they hear. And maybe I'll actually go out and vote.
Yeah.
So that helps us a lot. Earned media helps us a lot. Local radio, Michael Berry coming out and talking about us is a great thing. He's a great guy. So. And being a contributor on Fox News certainly can't hurt.
No, not at all.
So little things like that, it all starts to add up. And again, it's never enough. I mean, Kathleen Wall, who I beat, had plenty of name ID because she could put on commercials during the Olympics.
Yeah,
that's tough to compete with,
insane.
man. It's really tough to compete with. But in the end, you still have to connect with voters. So it still shows that democracy works. Okay, voters can't be tricked that quickly. You still got to connect with them in person, and it's not just showing up. You got to perform once you're there. So, and that's what we put a lot of effort into, is just really just getting in front of them and trying to make them feel some kind of optimism for our country and that we actually know the policies we're talking about and we're going to be effective in implementing them and articulating their values. That's what people want to know. Are you going to articulate what I believe well to the rest of the country in this kind of very divided scene? Are you going to fight the Democrats the way I want you to?
Right.
And the answer is yes. Yes, we will.
Well, and one of the things that was nice is you're always looking for ways to differentiate yourself during a campaign from your opponents. And some of that is talking about your own story. Some that's talking about the why you should vote for me. Some that's talking about why you shouldn't vote for the other guy. But there's some that you communicate through the way you run your campaign. And you guys, you knew that you weren't going to be able to win on the money side, and that meant that you were going to win on the number of mailers you could send out, or the Olympics TV ads you could put out, or even on the radio. So you had to find an asymmetric advantage. Something you're very familiar with from the military side. And so by focusing on a lot of your effort on the ground game and on the individual connection, I think I'm a huge ground game fan. That's something I've always pushed very heavily. And the listeners are not surprised by that. They hear we talk about it every week.
Yeah.
But by doing that, it's just so important to be able to build that connection, because between your signs and creating a question, which I've never seen another sign that's created a question or made you want to learn more than what yours does. Because your first thought is, why is a pirate running for Congress? And second, you're like, well, maybe he's probably not a pirate, but what the heck's up with this? I haven't, this is interesting. I want to know more. And it's admittedly difficult to create that kind of question outside of what you guys been able to do, which is really cool because it leverages your story and your unique leadership qualities that you've got coming out of your time in the SEALs. So you guys eked by Kathleen with a little bit over 200 votes advantage. Just incredible. I was watching that till late at night myself, and I know you guys had to be a little bit nervous as that went back and forth.
It was tough.
It's about 2 a.m. or something like that you came out on top, right?
Yeah, and it only really hit me that day that because we knew that we were going to perform extremely well on Election Day because the momentum was very obvious by that point. Towards the end of early voting, we were very much ahead, but then it kind of dawned on us that there's a lot of mail-in ballots, and they come in so early. The election being on March 6th is is kind of a facade. It wasn't really on March 6th.
Yeah.
It was the 30 days before that. And like we already talked about, it's really hard to build that kind of name ID so fast. We're at a severe disadvantage. This race truly favored people like Kevin Roberts and Kathleen Wall, who had some infrastructure in place and had the money in place to just go right away. Did not favor a campaign like ours at all.
Even just on the experience side, there's a lot that you learn just in your first time being a candidate, and a lot of people. I think you were able to kind of shorten that learning curve because of your leadership experience and the kind of situations that you've been in and lived through. But there's just so much you learn your first time doing anything, and campaigning on a short time frame is one of those. That obstacle alone would be enough to cause some serious hiccups for a lot of people.
That's true. And our biggest mistake was we didn't have the money or the expertise really to somebody to tell us, like, you need to mail to all the seniors who are getting their mail-in ballots. You need to tell them who you are. Okay, they never heard from us. We lost thousands of votes that way. Little things like that that we had to learn the hard way, and it almost cost us the whole thing. It was only close because of that. It was only close because of the mail-in ballots. It wouldn't have been close otherwise. We would have absolutely won. But that's where we're at. And as far as like how to be a candidate, you definitely learn as you go. But that wasn't as hard. I think my experiences sort of lent themselves to just your basic understanding of leadership and what it takes to get somebody to believe in you. At Harvard, we do a lot of political training too. You get exposure to a lot of just the basics, and that helps too. And it helped more than I even realized. I kind of brushed it all off until we were actually doing it, and I realized maybe we learned a lot more than I thought from Harvard and other kind of more conservative like think tanks that I would really just go to learn more about politics and running for office. Because I did, again, it wasn't a total surprise. I knew that I wanted to do it sometime down the road, but I'm young. I could figure that out when the opportunity knocks, and then the opportunity knocked and slapped me in the face, and so it was time to go.
Yeah, go time.
Yeah.
Gosh. So I've spent a lot of time helping identify and train candidates over the last several years of my career, and when I go to do that, I look for target-rich environments. What are communities or populations of people that I can look at who have those intangibles? It's like you can learn how to run a campaign. I can help teach somebody how to do that. You can hire a good consultant and raise a little bit of money, and you can put that together. But there are certain intangibles when it comes to leadership qualities and experience and that desire for mission that are not common. And people with military background, especially combat vets, have always been a group that I've seen as a very rich pool of people to draw from. And that's obviously your background. What do you think? I mean, one, do you agree with me on that? And two, if so, what do you think are some of those things that you got through your time in the SEALs and through your combat time that uniquely prepared you for this battle, this new mission?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's always a breath of fresh air to work with combat vets, like our mutual friend Kenneth is. It changes people in a way that's really hard to quantify. It's this sense that, I mean, the worst insult you could ever give a SEAL is to call them I'm not allowed to say it on air, but call them, we'll say a euphemism, like a lazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the worst thing in the world. I mean, it hits people truly hard because everything you do is 110%. And the worst thing to have is a reputation of not doing 110%. That just doing your job. Doing your job is just, that guy just does his job. That's such an insult. No, you want to be called a rock star, and if you're not, then it's just well known. So there's that's just the nature of the community, and it's very pervasive. And nobody is ever ready to kind of rest on their laurels, right? It's a very hungry environment, and it has to be. You're always hungry for that next mission, that next mountaintop. And that's everybody. You hit deployment day one, and you're like it drives your partner force overseas crazy, because they're like, God, the new Americans are here and they're so ready to go, and they're like, and they're tired, they're there all the time. So like, whether Afghans or Iraqis, but that's just the way we operate. We want to get everything done in that 6 to 9 month deployment, and that just never goes away, right? And once you have it, it never goes away. And there's a few other lessons. It's taking care of your people. It's realizing what leadership is. Getting that it's not really about authority in the SEAL teams, and that's a difference between the SEAL teams and the rest of the military. Is and special operations and the rest of the military. That it's a slightly more horizontal organization as opposed to like that very strict officer enlisted separation. There's a lot more overlap of leadership and management and working together between the leaders and subordinates in the SEAL teams, and it creates a very healthy environment, I think, and it's something we miss a lot, and you're always trying to look for it outside.
Yeah.
And you find it a lot in fellow combat vets, and so it's to sum it up, it's service before self, and it's taking care of your people, and it's being mission oriented, and it's never quitting and always wanting to do the best job possible. And I think that a lot of those lessons really carry over into or should carry over into public policy, and Congress could use a little bit of that, I certainly believe.
I would definitely agree, and hopefully here in about 8 months, 7 or 8 months, they'll get a dose of that with you getting up there. Definitely excited to watch the next month or so of the campaign play out, and I'm very optimistic about seeing you go to Congress. Where can folks go to find out more about you or about your campaign, or if they're in the Houston area?
Just go to CrenshawForCongress.com. It's FOR, not the number 4, CrenshawForCongress.com. And you can really find all the answers there. And you know what? There's a text number, 713-364-0067. 713-364-0067. If you text that number, you can stay in touch with the campaign.
Right on. And we're going to link over to both y'all's website as well as the Jocko podcast episode where folks can find more about you. Dan, I just appreciate you coming on today. Being willing to share some of your story with our listeners.
Appreciate it. It was great to be here.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from My Campaign Coach.